Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and the subject today is the elimination of the kickoffs and how that could be happening. I think you can see, unfortunately, momentum is being built right now by the National Football League to take away the kickoffs. The problem is concussions, and studies continue to show that even though they have reduced the number of kickoff returns, what they have done is still had a similar percentage of concussions on the ones that they've had. If you really look at the way that the rule change has gone, first the move was to take the kickoffs and take it from the 30 to the 35-yard line. So with that in mind, back in 2010, when it was back at the 30, 80.1% of the returns were taken, where it started to dry up each year to 53.5, to where last year only 41.1% of the kickoffs were returned. So that it's still got some good touchdowns, still had some good plays. You just didn't have as many. And even though that reduced the number of concussions, the percentages still for the number of plays that are out there, the 1,008 returns, 80 yards, the 100,080 that returned still left a void in the sense that they still worry about concussions. So the change this year, which is probably going to take the kickoff returns under 40%, is now having the ball spotted at the 25-yard line if there's a touchback. And, last year, record number of touchbacks, no surprise, it's gone up every year. I mean, you think about it goes from 2011 from 1,120 to last year, 1,470. So now the incentive is, if you're going to be 8-9 yards deep in the end zone, what ends up happening is that you may not be allowed, even if you're the best returner in the league, even if you're a Tyler Lockett, allowed to return it, because now you'd have to get 34 yards out just to get to the 25-yard line. That's why there's probably going to be less returns this year. So the plan by the National Football League is see how that goes, see what coaches do, whether they're going to readjust their game and give them a chance at the 25-yard line. If you really think about it, I mean, statistically, if you go into analytics, that 5-yard gap from starting a drive at the 20 to the 25-yard line may be worth about 1 point a game for the returning team, because you now can, you get 2 completions, and the next thing you're across the 50-yard line. And that's a big advantage where you can maybe get to the field goal. But what I'm concerned about overall, there seems to be a broad effort by the National Football League, in a good cause, for safety, to try to come back and say, you know what, here's our way to make the game safer. But think about what's eliminated if you take away the kickoff returns in a couple years. I mean, drives will start at the 20, 25-yard line, wherever they feel that should be. Then you have no possible onside kicks, because if you do have an ability to have an onside kick, everybody knows it's going to be an onside kick. There's not going to be any surprise. I guess, you have the choice, if you're going to do it, to put the ball at the 35-yard line and try that onside kick, but it's a given that it's going to go. And so that takes another part of the game that can be so exciting, that surprise onside kick, where all of a sudden you get a touchdown, you get the extra point, and then you get the ball back with a chance to score even more. So that takes another element of the game. Special teams is 1/3 of the game. That's always what coaches say. And slowly but surely, the NFL, again, for reasons of either trying to make the game more exciting with the extra points or safer with the possible changes in the kickoff rule, are taking the task of saying, all right, we're chipping away at special teams. And so, in other words, special teams aren't as special. And so what's going to happen to a lot of different things? I mean, for example, the great kickoff returners, a lot of them won't even be in the league. That's kind of sad. I mean, can you imagine? Devin Hester was one of the best returners in NFL history. In fact, he was just recently cut by the Atlanta Falcons at the age of 33. So probably is going to be tough for him to get back. If he does, it's probably going to be for a minimum salary contract, which I don't know if that appeals to him or not. But he may not have been able to make it on his ability as a wide receiver. But think about all those many touchdowns that he had for return that now you're not going to see. Sure, they may mess around a little bit with punt returns. That's a possibility, but at least that will survive. There is no timetable right now for the National Football League to eliminate kickoffs, but it's something that you can see that they are thinking about, and thinking about very hard. back in the off season, they had a conference call with 32 special teams coaches, and they were all kind of, said, okay, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What is the future of kickoff returns? And of course, naturally, the league wasn't going to really tip it off, but you can see that they did stress that you don't want to have the concussions that are caused by all those colliding bodies going down at the fastest pace. One of the things they were thinking about is maybe not having the guys run up to the kickoff spot so they had a little less momentum doing it. Maybe that's a better idea, but I still think the idea of eliminating kickoffs takes too much away from the game. The kickoffs are the home runs. The kickoffs are the inside the park home runs of baseball. They are so exciting. I mean, just go back to last year. Think about how many exciting plays came from Tyler Lockett, who, basically became that person that eventually replaced Leon Washington. Remember when Leon Washington was a Seahawk and was a Pro Bowl return guy? I mean, he brought great field position. He got great excitement. Now, if there's going to be no kickoffs, there's going to be a sameness. Everything starting at the 25, 20-yard line, whatever yard line they pick, trying to at least, get that game going. So I don't know what can stop it. I guess certainly if there's a way to continue to make it safer that you can have the kickoffs. One of the things I'm concerned about from the injury standpoint, there's a thing that's called the mortar kick. And what the mortar kick is, you punch it up high, take it down maybe to the 5-yard line, and you have everybody going for that one area. To me, the mortar kick is one that probably could cause more injuries because now you're hitting a certain area, you're getting 11 defenders charging down to the same place, crunching what's going to be a high kick, everybody looking up in the air, trying to do that. I mean, that could actually cause more concussions, and if that's going to be the case, then they're going to say, all right, well, see, it just doesn't work with the kickoffs, let's eliminate it. So I'm curious to see what everybody out there thinks about that because it's a very scary part to take good parts of the game off. Hey, we know long-term concussions is a big issue. Concussions is something that a lot of parents are no longer their kids to be able to play football. It's one where you worry long-term what's going to be the impact of the concussion story in the NFL. I mean, youth football numbers are down as far as participation, even though there is so much more of an effort to educate everybody on the safety issues. So it's one to kind of watch. But, how bad would it be not to have the returns of a Tyler Lockett, a Leon Washington? They've been such a big part of what the Seahawks have been able to do in this great run that Pete Carroll's been able to hire. And I think you can see that Pete Carroll values it very much. I mean, remember, they traded up to get Tyler Lockett. And fortunately, his career is going to be a very good one because not only is he a fantastic returner, but he's a great receiver. But if he wasn't as good of a receiver, then Tyler Lockett may not even been a factor. One of the reasons they did trade up for him was that ability to break big plays as a returner. It's something that Pete Carroll really cherishes because one thing that he does, he has that analytical approach where he looks at turnovers as being a big factor, because again, you're getting the ball back, but also now you have the ability with a turnover and interception to get good field position, and a returner can give you great field position. So you'd hate to see these things being eliminated. But one by one now, the NFL continues to make change. You go back and you look at the first change was taking away the wedge. Then it was a matter of putting the kickoffs from the 30 to the 35-yard line. Now it's going to be having the touchdowns, putting the ball at the 25-yard line. Slowly but surely, they're eating away the kickoffs. And, a couple years down the line, again, I still worry. Curious to see what everybody thinks. Listen, we all want safety. Safety is such a vital part. You don't want the CTEs of the players of the future. You want them to have great lives after football, and that's a great thing. Still, it has to be remembered, this is a physical sport. You have 280-pound guys hitting 280-pound guys or guys that are lighter, that are heavier, and that's just part of the game. I applaud the National Football League, and I applaud the Players Association for continuing to say, okay, here are the things that we're going to try to do to make the game safer. Do different things with helmets. One of the things that every team is doing right now, they're putting chips on shoulder pads and chips on players to judge their speed. They can look at so many different things, judge how the collisions are going to be. With the concussion issue, it's one where you really don't have the answers. As much as they may say that science has been able to advance the study of concussions, we're still at the beginning stages. It's still hard to diagnose that. I think you can see from the way games go, the way it goes in the National Football League, and just about in all sports. I mean, soccer is no different. I mean, soccer doesn't have the uniforms uniforms that the NFL players have. They don't have the pads and the shoulder pads, but concussions are all part of that game. You hope you can clean up the concussions, but what you want to make sure is that you clean up the sport without damaging the sport. The sport will survive without kickoffs, but it's not going to be as exciting and it's not going to be as good. So let's hope that as time goes on, the numbers of concussions start going down to the point where they're going to be able to continue the kickoffs, have that as part of the game, and really celebrate special teams. We're pleased to be joined by one of the best returners really in the last couple decades in Dante Hall to talk about what's going on and what might happen in the National Football League. And I know, Dante, you've always had a great sense for where things are going, and where I'm worrying about the NFL in a couple years, maybe as soon as next year, could eliminate kickoffs. I mean, they're biting into it each year. How bad would that be if that happens?
I mean, you're talking to a guy that without this phase of the game, I wouldn't have had a career. So for a guy like me, obviously, I'm going to be biased and think it's horrible for the game, absolutely horrible. You're just taking away a big part of the game that the fans have grown accustomed to love and get probably, most excited about.
Yeah, because, I mean, the way I look at it, and I know concussions are a big concern, and they're doing everything they can to minimize concussions, but a great return that you would have or a Devin Hester would have is almost like a grand slam home run, an inside-the-park home run. I mean, you don't see it often, but you want to see it because it's excitement.
Well, you saw it often with Hester. You saw it really often with that guy, but yeah, that's what it's all about, John. It's this whole concussion rhetoric that has, from the youth, the grassroots of the game, all the way to the top, just shaking and shooken. So it's what it's all about. I get what they're trying to do. I understand what they're trying to do is knock down concussions. Obviously, that part of the game is the most violent because of the speed buildup, obviously. But at the same time, hey, we know what we sign up for as football players. At this point, okay, it was released. We know that you're going to have concussions, and it's a possibility that you're going to have CTE. Do you still want to play ball? Once you sign up for that, that's just part of the game. It's part of the risk of the game. It's what makes us different from the average person because we're putting our bodies, our livelihoods on the line. So I think it just has to be an understanding of that. You sign off, and obviously we want to be smart about concussions. And, if a person is concussed, we want to make sure that they get the proper treatment. But as of trying to eliminate concussions in a game that is so violent, I think you're just treading up Poops Creek without a paddle, in my opinion.
Absolutely. What was it like when you were returning? I mean, just the feel of it, being able to get under the ball and then just explode.
It was, I think, the best way I could describe it, it was like being a rock star or a hip-hop icon or an Adele-type singer on the biggest stage. Everybody's watching you. What are you going to do? Entertain us. And the way you entertain them was by shaking the guy out of his shoes or taking it all the way back to the house. So I think the best way to describe it, John, is as a rock star on stage in front of about 100,000.
Yeah, that's a scary part because you bring it up. It's like, you're right. I mean, you would hope you would have an NFL career. I mean, you might have been able to do it as a wide receiver or a running back. But, I mean, with especially like you had, it allowed you to grow in all areas, but it gave you the opportunity.
Absolutely. You spot on with that, John. Without the special teams, the coaches are not able to see my ability with the ball in my hand. So that is where me being able to play in the slot on offense, getting some packages for myself, it all sprung from my effort and my team's effort on special teams. So a guy like me, I'm not going to even get that opportunity to play in the slot, especially a guy that played running back his whole life prior to the NFL. You're not going to even get an opportunity if you haven't shown what you can do on special teams.
And then you think about just historically what's taken away. I mean, I still go back, and I'm sure you probably watched NFL films on this. I mean, you wouldn't have the Billy White Shoes Johnsons make plays and big celebrations and things like that. I mean,
the Gale Sayers, the Eric Metcalfs, the Deion Sanders. You can go on and on and on. Gale Sayers. I mean, like, just all these great iconic plays that, like you said, we all watch on NFL film. Like you want to take that away? I'm just not a fan of that at all.
No, but I mean,
but I get it. I understand.
yeah, but you can see they're slowly chipping away. In fact, you go back and you're a historian. You followed for many years. You watch NFL films and you see the Billy White Shoes Johnson, the great returns, the celebrations, and you eliminate the kickoff, and boom, those things aren't there.
Yeah, and that's sad to even think about, John. I mean, like you mentioned, even guys. I would even go further with guys like Gale Sayers and Eric Metcalf, and Deion Sanders. These guys were all inspirational to me as a young kid watching. Like, hey, I can do that. Look at these little guys making it big. So yeah, and think about the iconic moments that came during the return game. Think about Deshaun Jackson's walk off against the Redskins when he was an Eagle. Like, are you kidding me? You want to eliminate that because to cut down just on a few percentages of concussions? I understand, but I'm not a fan of it.
Then the other thing is that it would also pretty much take away onside kicks. Now, I mean, it's like, okay, if you have some way where you're going to be lining up for some kickoff, then it's going to be an onside kick, because if there's no kickoffs, then how do you disguise an onside kick, or how do you have it?
So that's another great point. And what you're making me realize, John, is that the more you tinker with the special teams game, you just start eliminating a big percentage of the overall NFL game, because special teams, as we all know, is a third of the game. I mean, you have a 30% percentage of the plays being played on special teams, whether it's kickoff, as you just mentioned, onside kick, the punt situations, field goals, extra points. There's all of these things that I just think you start tinkering with the product too much, which is a game that America has obviously grown to love. And you can have concussion awareness and still not have to tinker with the game. You just need better awareness, not necessarily new rules.
But I mean, you see when an NFL starts going, the ball starts rolling, sometimes it's hard to stop it. And I mean, do you sense that that's where the NFL is heading, as bad as it might be?
I have a radio show that I co-host every day, John, and we talked about this. And my take, in my opinion, is basically, I think the rhetoric is going to die down. I mean, just think about the horse collar. Remember when that was a big issue? What's a horse collar? When T.O. got hurt, then that kind of slowly died down. I think eventually, as all things does, it would eventually die out. This whole concussion, fearful show that's going on right now, I think eventually dies down, because we get, and I say that because we're going to have better awareness, going to have better treatment, so it's going to become a non-issue because of the way we're going to approach it and go about it.
Of course, I don't know if you were able to get into any of the officials' meetings when they went around to team by team, but they actually, believe it or not, they've actually made it tougher this year with a new rule on horse collars, in the sense that what they're going to do is they're going to give a penalty if you grab the nameplate, not just the top, where it was for the normal one. Now, if you grab the nameplate, it's a horse collar penalty.
I mean, it's tough, because on one side of the coin, you want to say, I commend them for trying to make it safe. But the reality is, it's a violent game. So you can't take violence out of a violent game, or you start tampering with the product. Like, I think about the Cincinnati game last year when the linebacker Dante, he hits a guy. Now, that was a big call in the game. To me, I thought he was trying to let up. Yes, he made contact, but he tried to let up, in my opinion. He could have really laid out and killed that guy if he wanted, and he didn't. And yet, because of this new rule of no contact to the head, the whole outlook of the playoffs, the Cincinnati Bengals season, all of these things are tinkered on, things that I just think you can't eliminate. You can't eliminate these things. It's a violent game.
We're talking to Dante Hall. I know that, as you look back, what did you think when they said, okay, we're going to take kickoffs and move them from the 30 to 35? Did you think that it was pretty much going to take touchbacks and put them over 50% and take the returns down to like what it currently is now?
You know what I thought, John? Honestly, I thought if I was still playing, they better have a kicker that could kick it out, because I would still bring every one of them out. Period. If it's not out to the back of the end zone, we're bringing it out. So blockers get ready, coaches get ready. We're bringing it out, because you don't want to eliminate the possibility of that big run, that big play. So, but no, I had not thought about it. Them trying to eliminate the game until this recent notion of the touchback to the 25 now, and all these other things. But it wasn't until recently that I was like, wow, they are slowly inching away at trying to remove kickoff.
Yeah,
I
'cause,
thought
I
it was
mean,
all rhetoric at first. I think it's a reality now.
yeah, in fact, I mean, how much freedom do you think coaches now will allow, knowing that if you're going to be 9 yards deep in the end zone and you can still return it, do you think that they would allow many guys as great as you were and as great as the top guys in the game were to take it 9 yards back, to get the 34 yards, to get past the 25-yard line?
Yeah, it's going to obviously depend on the returner. If you see a guy, that has that ability, and you couple that with a coach that's a little edgy, not a traditional conservative type of coach, then I think yes. But for the most part, no. You're going to see, as the numbers have shown, John, and last year it was 41% of kickoffs were returned. That's 50% down from where it was, just 2011 before when the new collective bargaining agreement was installed. It was at 80%. So I think you're already seeing the effect that, overall, the kickoff game is, if not eliminated, drastically affected.
Yes, I don't know if you were. I wasn't even a big fan of moving the extra points back to the 15-yard line, because it's like, I always thought it's like, hey, it's not broke. Why fix it? And now,
I got to disagree with you on that one, John.
You're
like
okay.
That.
Go ahead.
I like that one. I was a fan of that one. That's why I'm not so. It's not easy to always criticize the league, because they do great things like that. But sometimes, they get it wrong. But that one, I thought they got it right, John.
And, of course, I would imagine that at least the one thing that can't change, at least for now, will be punt returns. I mean, sure. In fact, I'm looking forward to see what coaches, with the new rule on the touchbacks, taking it to the 25s, are going to try the mortar kick, because that would seem to be dangerous physically.
Be very dangerous, because you flirt with it going out of bounds. And sometimes that mortar kick is not an easy kick to execute. Like, it takes precision. So if you are off, you could pop it straight up 20 yards down the field, So you got to have the kicker to do it and the coach to be edgy. But I think you're right. You're going to see a lot of guys practice it and definitely use that as a weapon for the kickoff team.
Well, Dante, I mean, I hope that you and everybody else can at least hold back those rules, keep kickoffs returns back in the game, because I think it's a great part of football, and you were so great at doing that. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, John. Take care, buddy.
Hey, Dante, thank you.
Everyone, it's time
to ask the professor.
Whatever you say.
Each week on Schooled with the Professor, we take your text questions, and Apollo 6-1084 has one. It's like, when the three-man rush on kickoffs return was outlawed a few years ago, what was the reasoning behind it? Well, pretty simple. And again, as we talked to Dante Hall and we talked at the beginning of the podcast about that, it was because that probably was one of the more forceful things as far as concussions. Because think about this. I mean, you have a band of brothers. They're arm in arm right in the middle of the field. And, 280 to 320-pound guys that are coming in together and, taking out 1, 2, or 3 players. And, the concussions. And really, I know one of the things the NFL did very well was they showed film footage of how some of these guys just got torn up, destroyed. And that was unfair. It was very dangerous, because think about, you can now have 700 to 900 pounds of football players in the middle of the fields, locked arm in arm, just crunching one guy. And you've seen concussions, you've seen neck injuries, you've seen, broken bones, all those things. That one, I think, was the wise one to do. Sure, because one of the things that you really have with the three-man wedge is, again, so much weight and so much big bodies taking out, because it's not like, it's 3-on-3 as far as the collisions. It like is 3-on-1, because you take the closest guy and you just absolutely knock him out. And so it was such a forceful thing that probably was a wise thing to do. And maybe in many ways, they probably should have done it years ago. It was great from the strategic part of it. Now one of the things that they have to try to make sure is that you have like an even number of players, spread across the field, so you don't have an overload, where you don't have a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 type of block. If it's going to be a block, it's going to be 1-on-1, and you still get concussions out of those. But what you don't want to have is that big mass coming over, just doing it. I mean, it's almost like you're watching, some old barbarian movie, and you got the guys, all linked together. And it's like they can together almost knock down a wall, or they can knock down can you imagine what that force would be just on one football player? Very, very dangerous and a wise thing to do. I mean, it was great for the old school type players because it was kind of a bravado that was there, a bravado in a sense that look how physical we can be, look how we can be together as a team, and look how we can do these knockout type of things. But the danger of it really led to the ability for that to be, just crunched, and that needed to be eliminated from the game. But again, safety is such a big issue. It's an issue that really needs to be at the forefront of what the NFL is trying to guard against. And the wedge was one of the just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb because you saw a lot of sore bodies, a lot of injured bodies that came out of that. And the footage is there. And even more so now, I mean, you can really isolate with the HD TVs, with the replays, and then just see how dangerous. If you really go back and look at the wedges, you understand why it was eliminated and why it should have been eliminated. As much as I don't like to see the kickoffs taken away, I do like to think that the wedge thing was something that was just, it was overdone. It was something that needed to be weeded out of the game because of those injury factors. And you did see a slight drop in the number of concussions and the number of injuries that happened. And, serious injuries. I mean, that probably with the wedge, you could have some of the most serious injuries in the National Football League. Injuries that really could ruin a life. Could have the CTE part of it. So that's why they were smart in doing that. And you applaud the National Football League for coming up with that idea and identifying that was a problem and not a good part of the game. Now the debate still comes down. I mean, can you salvage the kickoffs so that you can have the ability to enjoy the game and still have some safety issues? That's now going to be the debate for the last couple of years. But the wedge really needed to go, and I think that the officials also do a very good job, particularly as they're running down on kickoffs, on making sure there's no overloads to one side of the field with the number of players who are trying to make the blocks, because again, you want to try to keep that safety level. So yeah, some teams can come up with some creative ways to position guys, space guys, to make sure that their returner has a good chance to break through and make a play. But what is still the possibility is now the wedge was something that needed to go. It needed to be taken out of the game, and it was a very wise thing that the NFL did in making that decision. So that's why the wedge, Apollo 06, was taken away, and that's why it'll never come back. Now, the big question is if there's any way to salvage kickoffs and kickoff returns so that you can still entertain people with big plays without as many injuries. That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. You can follow me on Twitter at ClaytonESPN and send me your NFL questions with hashtag ClaytonSchooled for a chance to get your questions on the podcast. If you have a minute, please let's have a review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.